Hello, and welcome to Project Possible with me, Rich Leigh. It's a podcast where I talk to incredible people about who they are, why they are who they are, what they know. I just want to know stuff. I'm curious. I want to see what's possible for myself, for us, for society, and that means having conversations with people that have done incredible things or think in ways that maybe I don't, or know stuff, as I say, that I don't. And today is a big one. Before I start on that, thank you for all your feedback for last week's episode with Amanda, the director of the Samaritans. Fantastic episode, I hope you'll agree. Lots of lovely messages. My hope is if it just makes one person consider, not even necessarily pick up that phone, consider picking up the phone to Samaritans and talking when they feel like they need somebody to listen, then it's a success. A huge success for me would be somebody saying, do you know what? I think I might want to volunteer. How incredible would that be? And today we're talking about men's mental health. It is Men's Mental Health Month still, Awareness Month, and not just focusing on men, obviously, but today this episode kind of does. Speaking to George from TheTinMen, he describes himself as an unapologetic activist. He is a creator who's been shaking up the conversation around men's mental health and suicide prevention by asking almost the uncomfortable questions that a lot of people are perhaps too scared to ask, and he wants to have conversations about things that maybe don't feel super comfortable to talk about. Domestic violence against men, for instance, increased incidences of suicide among men, post-alienation, from their children, their ex-partners and things like that. These are huge topics, and we can't be mealy-mouthed about, men just need to talk, do we? Okay, cool. What's actually happening here? I'm coming at this from the perspective of somebody who's just lost somebody, my brother Jordan, in February to suicide. I'm trying to understand this as best as I can. It's in something that's so difficult and deeply hard to understand. I'm trying to just look at all avenues here and have conversations that make sense and might make a difference. And it's not just about talking, it's about action too. And as I spoke about in the Samaritans, the funding isn't there in all the right places just right now. Anyway, what I really respect about George is he's not coming at this from a place of anger. For me, it's curiosity and honesty. He's trying to have the kind of good faith conversations that actually move us forward. And whether you agree with everything he says or not, and you might not, you might hate this and turn it off and want to shout at me, I think it's important. I think it's about seeing the full picture, and I hope it makes you think and that you take something from this. If you want to talk to me, do talk to me. hello@projectpossiblepod.com, on Substack, projectpossiblepod.substack.com. You can comment on every single week's posts. That's where I get the episodes out. Or you can find me on social media @RichLeighPod, LeighPod, on Instagram, TikTok. Come say hey, come talk to me. Give your thoughts, give your opinions. Be part of this community. Right. With all that said, and that is a lot of preamble, and I know that most of you skip this bit anyway, or some of you do, that's fine. With all that said, all that remains to be said is, without further ado, I bring to you my conversation with George at TheTinMen. Can you explain what it is you do for a living?
Currently, I call it men's health and male suicide prevention. And I just create content that I think is meaningful and useful, that told me things that I didn't know and wish I had known earlier. So yeah, I run TheTinMen, which is a social media page, mostly on Instagram, but on other platforms, that shares really important academic insights into men's health and male suicide. But from like a left-wing point of view, but also outside of the typical feminist frameworks are typical of gender equality and men's mental health, so quite a small. And
are you
niche.
Qualified in that? Was that something you always wanted to do?
No, I'm not qualified. My qualifications are: I'm a Bachelor of Arts from a very average university. I'm a very experienced creative comms strategist. So I worked across various different elements of film, design, animation, branding, strategy. But people always ask me, you a researcher? I'm like, no.
So where does the interest in it come from?
Just a chronic sense of self-righteousness, to be honest. I always...
Was there a moment? Was there somebody...
Yeah. I used to have an office in South London. I'm still in South London now, but in Peckham this was. and it was a very progressive part of London. And I'd have lunch with other people in the building, and some of them were like charities, violence against women charities, and a lot of them were very passionate feminist voices. And I would just be quietly listening over lunch at what they were saying and how they talked about men, how they talked about men's issues, and how they talked about men's mental health, and how they talked about domestic violence. And I'd be very quiet, listening in, but taking notes. And then I'd go away, and I'd spend time just researching what they said and seeing how it lined up with the reality. And often it didn't line up really at all. And then that wedge of my day spent researching just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and my job running a film production company got so small that it's now more or less gone. And now I spend all my day just doing that, and then trying to work out ways in which I can use my creative skill set, like I mentioned, to distill this really important data around whatever, suicide, mental health, domestic violence, otherwise, into something that someone can consume through their phone in maybe 2 minutes. So that's what I do, and that's where it started. And it was mainly through me becoming disillusioned and losing faith in the feminists that I was hanging out with, and I considered myself a feminist at that point. And just, it wasn't like what they were saying was not true, it just wasn't the complete truth. And then I became even more concerned about when I would actually, just after a few weeks of doing this, I'd be like, well, you're talking about violence against women, but according to the United Nations Department of Drugs and Crime, 81% of homicides worldwide are against men. So if more than 4 in 5 murders are against men, why are we talking only about violence against? And then you just get
because those are mostly perpetrated by men.
Yeah,
is the answer you
yeah,
get. Right?
Yeah. But if your first response to me saying that most homicide victims are men is to point at the perpetrator, that to me is a problem. Where just because the perpetrator and victim has the same genitals or sex or whatever else, that doesn't invalidate the victim. I don't understand that. If a police officer ever did that, that wouldn't go down well. It's the same sort of bigotry that people used to use with so-called black on black crime to try and minimise it and try and wave it away. So, and that's what I saw from my friends, my former friends, and they would just get so angry. You'd be talking about that's not what this is about, or I would ask them about domestic abuse, and at the time 1 in 3 victims of abuse in the UK was a man. That's now 40%, so it's gone up. And it wasn't just the issues I was raising.
So 40% of domestic abuse victims in the UK are
so England and Wales, and it's 39% if we're going to be specific. Yeah. And I was getting this 2 tiers worth of shocked. The first one, tier 1, I'd be like, I can't believe there's 1.5 million men being abused every year in England and Wales. There's virtually no help for them. That was the first tier. And then I'd say that to someone, and then their response was even more shocking, where they'd be shouting at me, they had the finger in my face, and I wouldn't be bringing it up in a way that I was like trying to undermine them. I'd be like, honestly, this is a good faith point. And then, they'd be so aggressive, they'd either deny it, or they would call you a misogynist or an incel, or insert your insult here.
How quickly would they get from
immediately
that to
so
name
aggressively?
calling?
So, and then I was getting like a mini culture shock from what other scientists in this area, really highly esteemed researchers who we can go through. I talk a lot about Murray Strauss, who was the founding father of the field of family violence research, and his H-index. And H-index, briefly, is basically a measurement of how impactful your research has been. And his H-index was right up there with like Stephen Hawking's and Einstein's. He was like the Einstein of family violence research. He's passed away now. And he spent his whole life talking about gender parity in domestic violence, perpetration and victimhood. He was like, it's not gendered, it's the same. Women are more often injured, but not by a huge amount, but it's definitely not overwhelmingly women being abused. It's more or less 50-50. And he spent his life being harassed, picketed, getting death threats, people walking out of his conferences, protesting him, simply for sharing the truth. And I was like, there was no greater expert than him. And he's one of many researchers that were just castigated and had their careers ruined and lives threatened.
What do you hope the impact of your work is?
Just, trying to work my own little corner of the men's health space, trying to change opinion. Now I'm getting a bit more influence. I'm using that to sort of get my elbows in for some of the larger organisations in both the men's and women's sector that I think are behaving in ways that are self-serving, or at least could do better.
Do you think that they believe that you're a pain?
Yeah, no doubt they do.
Yeah.
But at the minute, they're just trying to put a lid on me.
Right. Why? Why do people not want to talk about the whole truth of this?
I don't know. I remember I've sent a message to Refuge UK, which is the biggest domestic violence charity in the world and the oldest. And same with Maury Strauss, the founder of that charity, Erin Pitsey, who's an old friend of mine, who I've interviewed multiple times. She said the same as Maury Strauss. She was the woman that set up Refuge, and she was the first person ever to open a shelter for any woman. She wrote the first book in the world on domestic violence. She's helped thousands of women and children. And she would say the same, like, it's not gendered. It's women are just as violent as men in relationships.
I mean, I sit here, we, as a family, it was quite a violent household, perpetrated by my father. And I sit here still absolutely caring about the men that this happens to as well, you know, just because it's happened to and around us. And I mean, I think people, when they think about domestic violence, they don't realise that it's not just fist to face. It can be in many, many other ways, and domestic abuse takes strange forms. But I still sit here saying, so that's 40% that are victims of. Why don't we? I've seen the other side and the enormous impact of that. And you've probably heard of adverse childhood experiences and all of those things. And you see how that plays out, and, you know, how that impacts a family from particularly a lower socioeconomic background, but everybody. So if I've seen that, why wouldn't I care about the flip side?
Yeah.
Why are we just pretending that this doesn't happen?
Yeah. And also helping violent women is obviously benefit to women too, because by not helping violent women get help, you're leaving them vulnerable to a man retaliating in self-defense or whatever else. And only going to be quoting Maury Strauss, but he said he will never end violence against women unless we talk about violence by women. And quoting Erin Pitsey, who's the woman that set up that first refuge, she talked about it being a cyclical generational issue that is passed down through the generations. It's children learn it from their parents and they'll pass it on to their children, and down and down and down. And just like any equation, you got to solve it from both sides.
I remember thinking, this is not the life I need or want.
No.
And, you know, breaking a cycle is incredibly difficult post that. And, you know, my kids can rest assured that I'll never touch them. You know? But also, you know, some of the coercive aspects. But it's when I say it's hard to break a cycle, people will be like, no, it's not. Just don't do it. It's like, but if that's the example that you've seen, and, you know, and that could be everything. That could be, you know, from the way that finances were, you know, sorted in the household to who took responsibility for what. Well, that's what you take then into your relationships and your future. But it takes an awful lot to take a step back and say, probably shouldn't be doing this, should we? You know, let's.
Well, a lot of people don't realise they're in the cycle. They don't think there's a problem to be solved.
Which I knew very young, very, very young. It wasn't normal. For me, this is about good faith, positive conversations about what we're doing and why. And why, like, basically, fuck you for not wanting to talk about this.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, that was often where my motivation came from. People telling me, like, go make your own page, go make your own space. This isn't about you. Stop hijacking the conversation. Blah, 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 blah. You know, go make your own discussion.
How do you see your role in the conversation about men's mental health and men's health in general?
I mean, primarily, I want it to be about adding to the conversation. I don't want to get into this who has it worse sort of gender war.
I think, and this is actually a note, I think you walk a brilliant line between exactly that. You're not saying, you know, forget women. You're saying, no. This, again, look at the whole truth here.
Well, yeah, there's 1.5 million abused men, as I said, but there's also 2.4 million abused women in England and Wales. So I'm happy to talk about both sides of that pie chart. But too often people don't talk about both sides. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, I care just as much about women and violence against women as anyone. But I just want to add to that. Yes, and it's not either or. It's both.
Why do you think there's space for you here as a commentator?
There isn't. I don't even know there's space.
So you forge in your own space. You said, you know, elbows earlier on.
Yeah,
digging your elbows in.
I was not welcomed in. Let's put it that way. They didn't roll out the red carpet for me. I just arrived. And
who else is doing good work in this space?
There's loads of people. There's loads of people that I find inspiring. I mean, Erin Pitsey, Maury Strauss, they're obviously quite old now, but I talk a lot of a guy called Mark Brooks, who's the chairman of Mankind, which is really the only charity supporting male victims of abuse in the UK. And he is fighting a long, hard fight, often on his own. against so many people in Westminster behind the scenes. He doesn't get the credit he deserves. And then there's other people like Ali Fogg. I've been talking to a guy called Duncan Craig who runs We Are Survivors, which is like the only sexual violence support service for male victims of sexual violence in the UK. And there's like a really amazing constellation of very small charities and organisations, non-profits and individuals all over the UK that work in men's health that do not get the credit that I think they deserve, doing work from nothing, like virtually no, like Mankind, for example. And this is the only support service really in England, at least, for male victims of abuse. They get no money from the government.
£0.
£0.
And is there a converse kind of?
Oh, millions, but still not enough for women, but certainly more than men.
I mean,
Yeah.
a pound more is
Yeah.
more. Right?
Yeah,
if that's what we're saying.
But they're running things off nothing, off goodwill and hard work and donations from the public. And I'm never short of inspiration from people like Mark, Duncan, Ali, a bunch of other people that I can name that are doing amazing work in the men's health space in the UK behind closed doors, and having a huge amount of success now, more and more and more. And often I find they're getting elbowed out by the big boys, the big men's health.
Who are the
like
big men's
Movember.
health? Well, I was going to talk about Movember because I heard you specifically talk about funding for Movember and and what it goes towards.
Yeah, well, I'm speaking on my own behalf here because there's a lot of people that have talked to me about Movember who are genuinely afraid to say what they really think because they are supported by Movember, their doors are opened by Movember for them, and if they were to say, we have these problems, they feel like they would lose money or opportunities or be otherwise punished for doing so. Whereas because I've already burnt all those bridges, I'll say what I want. So I'm making full use of that. Plus, I'll speak on behalf of other people.
Without naming names, but yeah.
Yeah, but then some of the men's health charities in the UK that are doing amazing work that were here 10, 15, 20 years ago, they can't compete with Movember. They haven't got tens of millions of pounds to spend on marketing to create amazing campaigns, which Movember do really well. So all the money will go to Movember, and none of it will go to the smaller organisations.
So are they not doing good work?
Yeah, they are. They're doing great work. The big success recently was the men's health strategy, which was announced by Wes Streeting, the health secretary, 6 months ago, which is basically it's not been formalised yet, but it's been announced and it's going to happen. And it's essentially a policy where UK government are like, we're going to take men's health seriously. We're not satisfied with 1 in 5 men dying before the age of 65, and we're not going to accept, 15 men dying young every single hour. So if this podcast takes an hour, that's 15 men dying young. Most of those are preventable. That's not good enough, and I agree. It's not acceptable that the biggest risk to my life and your life is suicide. So they're going to do something finally, and that's the men's health strategy. That was done through people like Mark and whoever else I mentioned, who started that 15, 20 years ago. And although they started it and they lit the fuse, it does require people like Movember with those big, deep pockets and those political connections to wade in and get over the line. But they seem to wait quite a while until we're on the final straight, and then they'll hop on and then they'll take it over the finish line and they'll get the photo ops, and that's fine. But
John Terry approach to
yeah. It's exactly the John Terry of men's. Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what they are. But we need a John Terry. Like he is.
That's true.
He is.
Take the tracksuit off.
We couldn't have done it without him. We couldn't have done it without him.
You see that Trump the other day at the Chelsea World, when they
Oh
won
my
that
goodness,
cup, and he wouldn't get off the stage, and
Yeah,
it's like they're trying to do the trophy
off.
lift,
Yeah.
and he's got the actual trophy, and they've been given a replica.
What? What? Where? What? It's in the Oval Office or something.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. No idea. He's like, I guess that should be mine.
Well, that's the least of Donald Trump's worries right now.
I mean, it is. Have you seen the South Park episode yet?
Yeah.
I watched it
It's hilarious.
this morning, just as soon as I could.
Yeah, the men's health strategy, which has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
Yeah, no,
Let's draw a
again,
thick line
let's
between.
keep the two things separate.
We do need the big boys with the big deep pockets and the ability to do marketing, but I just wish they would use their platform to lift up some of the people that were there first, who did the hard graft in the mud on their own. And too often they don't do that. Too often as well, if we're going to add to the criticism of Movember, they're not spending enough money on the work. They've got too much money sat in their bank account, which is not their money. Their governance isn't right.
Do you do figures?
I've done the figures.
Yeah. What's it looking
£54 million in the bank in the UK. This is the Movember Europe arm. £54 million, which is about 2.85 years worth of expenses. So for a charity, you're supposed to have around 6 months worth of cash in the bank. So if something goes wrong and there's no more donations to Cancer Research UK,
COVID happens, right?
yeah, cancer like, right, we've got 6 months now to work this out until we're done. That's normal. They're the cash reserves. That's the sort of
We're talking almost 3 years of cash
They've
reserves.
only got 3 years, and they're not. They don't do things on the ground. They're a fundraising company. They're not the ones doing the research. They'll raise the money and they'll give it to someone else. They'll raise the money and they'll give it to someone else.
Who are they giving it to?
Various different organisations and charities. You'll see them funding different initiatives, and a lot of it's really good. They did a lot of stuff around men's health that is very helpful, and they do a lot of policy work behind the scenes, but they're not doing enough for the amount of money they have. Plus, their governance. They have 9 trustees at Movember Europe. None of them are even British. None of them live in the UK. None of them even live in Europe. So I don't know how a charity can be run by 9 trustees and none of them are from this country.
Where are they from?
Australia, and 2 are from America. That's a problem in my opinion.
Well, because they're not seeing the on-the-ground issues, right?
No. Well, to be a trustee, you have to understand the culture of the country. You have to understand what British people want, what the laws are like, what's the policy like, and how can you do that if you're on the other side of the planet? I don't think you can.
What motivates you to put yourself in the middle of all this? Because as you become better known, you're walking down the street and somebody's taken a dislike to you for something you've said. Has that happened already?
I've had people shake my hand.
Yeah, excellent. Okay.
A few people, yeah, it's great. Like in the gym, like, come running over. I was like, that is me. Nice to meet you.
I mean, that's cool. That must motivate you. That must be something.
I love that. Yeah.
But has the opposite happened?
No. People are like, oh,
Do you worry that it might?
Not really.
And it's funny. It shouldn't. Let me clarify. Let me
I
be
give you my home
absolutely.
address.
You did, yeah. You had no idea who I am, and I had to take the balaclava off.
You might leave a big bag of shit on the doorstep on the way out.
I just think it shouldn't be controversial. It shouldn't be difficult. But you are saying things that some people don't like.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult position to put yourself in when we've seen, doxing and we've seen, things like that.
I am very obviously aware of that. Like I mentioned, Erin, again, founder of Refuge, said women can be just as violent as men. And then she got death threats and she had like a police
Just for having
escort.
said that.
Just for having said that. And she said a few things about interactive violence.
That's funny because that's a semantic almost concern.
Yeah.
It's like, no, violent doesn't mean effectively violent.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the impact I've heard, like if I'm violent with a woman or she's violent with me, I'm probably, as you've touched on before, I'm probably causing more damage.
Oh yeah.
Right?
I mean,
but to be, how do you equate violence? It could be just as violent as, well, is it throwing one punch? Is one punch a violence? Yes, you can be. You can do that to me just like I
Erin
do to you.
said that to someone in a refuge woman, and she said, "Yeah, but knives are a great leveler." So think about that.
Yeah.
And again,
That's
Erin,
awful.
she was in the refuges with thousands and thousands and thousands of abused women. And for her to come out of the refuge and be like, these are violent too, she famously polled the first 100 women that ever came to her. 62 were as violent as the men they left. So it wasn't like, it isn't a matter of, black and white. It's about interactive violence of both
As in they agreed that they were as violent as their partners.
Yeah, well, she would talk to them and she'd be like, hearing their stories and hear what they went through. Often they didn't realise they were violent themselves. But the point is that they were stuck in this
Because
cycle.
people don't want to say that, right? People don't want to admit that about themselves.
No,
they want to
absolutely
say,
not.
well, no, I'm just retaliating. It's nothing but all.
But if you were to draw a big pie chart of all intimate partner violence, 50% of that pie chart is interactive violence. So that's bilateral violence where both partners are violent towards each other. Of the remaining half, 70% of that is female perpetrated violence. And then 30% of that half, or 15% overall, is male perpetrated violence. And then of that 15%, 1/3 of that is severe male-only violence. So that's 5% of all intimate partner violence is the typical stereotype of...
Is that right?
Yeah. Severe male-only violence.
So
is
1 in
5%.
20
Yeah. But then, of course...
acts of domestic violence are male-only.
Severe
Severe.
meaning, someone's going to hospital with an injury. Half of it is both partners into a cycle of violence that slowly escalates over time. And then of the other half, 70% is women, and then 30% is men. And it's like, that is just the beginning of how complicated it gets. But if you ever Google, take a minute out of this podcast and just Google domestic violence, you're only going to see that 5%. You're going to see an image of a man doing that, or a man doing that to a woman. These cartoons.
Just for the audio, that's you holding your fist up.
Yeah, like a fist in someone's face,
or grabbing, like strangling somebody.
Which obviously happens, and that's serious and deserves to be spoken about. But as you've explained, it's not detailed enough. Like I know I've talked to someone who was abused, and if he wasn't home by 6 o'clock at night every night, his dinner was scraped in the bin, and he would have to sleep under the dining room table. That is what violence or abuse looks like.
It's terrifying.
When people always say that, I always talk about hitting children, how damaging that is to children. Like, again, Murray Strauss would talk about spanking kids, and he'd say it's the most prevalent yet least discussed cause of intimate partner violence. So you're basically teaching that child you can use violence to solve a disagreement or to correct someone's misbehaviour. That is what intimate partner violence often is. You don't like what your partner's doing, so you use violence. A lot of children are taught that through being hit by their parents. There is such thing as people, but I've heard about men being abused by the partner where they'll be deliberately have their sleep withheld from them by someone. Like, they'll be continually woken up through like slamming doors and stuff like that, intentionally. It's not sleep deprived, and that's obviously a form of torture at its most extreme, quite literally. But yes, hitting children, you're teaching kids to often use violence. Whenever I say that, there's always someone in the comments that's like, well, I was hit as a...
It's always those people that do this, and I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine. I'm like, yeah, you are. Congratulations. But my gran smoked cigarettes every day, and she lived till 90. That doesn't mean smoking isn't... Like, I think like half the people that smoke heavily don't die from smoking-related disease.
Right?
But that doesn't mean smoking isn't bad for your health. Like, not everyone that eats fast food every day is going to get diabetes. You're just increasing your chance of getting diabetes. Not every child that's hit by their parent is going to become an abuser. You're just increasing the rate or likelihood. So all of this is like trying to paint in more detail. And the reason I bring up spanking is that Keir Starmer has just recently announced he wants to halve violence against women, which is, of course, a noble cause. But then I remember the next day or maybe the following week, he announced that he wasn't going to ban spanking children in England. So it's still legal.
It's still legal?
It's legal. It is.
Genuinely?
You can hit your child, yeah. Not in Scotland. Scotland and Wales have got rid of it. Great.
I thought it was illegal. I genuinely, hand on heart, thought it was illegal. It's not.
You can hit your child. I mean, there's limits. Because obviously there is there should be, the line should be no violence whatsoever.
What's the legal definition? Like a cupped hand against the backside? What's the...
I don't know. There will be one though. And I was like, how could you want to halve violence against women and then with your next breath refuse to ban what might well be the biggest cause of that violence? Like, and that the thing is, he's not interested in that. He wants the headlines. And I've never seen any domestic violence campaign talk about spanking children. Never seen that from Refuge. Never seen that from Women's Aid. Never seen that from Respect, ever. And that's not surprising. And again, like, this brings me back to Movember, but they're not interested in violence against men and boys, despite me asking him repeatedly, why are you not going to... Because there's also another bill that's come in, a bit like the men's health strategy. The violence against men and boys bill was arrived in April. It's not been passed, and to be honest, it's probably not going to get passed. It almost certainly won't. But it's an attempt to see male victims of abuse and like give them visibility and give them support. Because currently, if you're one of those 1.5 million abused men in this country, you're not considered a man, you're considered a woman. You're classed as a victim of violence against women. So you'll be a male victim of violence against women, which makes no sense. And the reason that happens is because there was no strategy for violence against men. You're just put into the violence against women pot.
So statistically, that's what you'll go into the pot as?
Yeah, you'll literally be classed by the government as a male victim of violence against women. And it's like, how invalidating is that? It's absurd. It's like Orwell. It's like worse than Orwell. But to finish off my little thought on Movember, and we can just put it to bed. The violence against anyone has a massive detrimental impact on their mental and physical health. There's evidence against violence against women that finds that a woman's experience of intimate partner violence has a worse impact on her health than smoking, poor diet, drug use. Intimate partner violence has a worse impact than that. So clearly it is a women's health issue, and everyone knows that it is. So if Movember are a men's health charity, why are they not helping male victims of abuse? Do they not consider male victims of abuse and male victims of violence to be a men's health issue? Because obviously it is. And why are they not behind the bill? And that's my third and final criticism of them.
Appreciate that. I mean, is there something that we could do to make all victims of violence, but particularly men who, from a social perspective, might not want to stand up and say, I've been abused? Is there more that can be done to have them stand up and be counted almost?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be quoting Gloria Steinem with this one, who, for those of you who don't know, is like the probably the most famous feminist ever. And she said, to be it, you have to see it. And she was speaking about male CEOs, I think. And she was saying that women need to see female CEOs for them to become a CEO. And I was like, absolutely. But men also need to see themselves as legitimate victims of violence. They need to be represented in national campaigns. They need to be in that Google result I mentioned. They need to be spoken about in the news, on TV, by politicians with equal importance to women. And they're just not. So
do you think that's because the powers that be / society at large thinks then it negates or takes away from the issues of violence against women?
I think that's what they say, and that must be part of it. But I think there are just large lobbying bodies in the women's sector whose funding it would be at risk if they were to start to say 40% of victims of abuse are men, because then they would feel like, well, I guess 40% of funding should have to go to them, and they don't want to. They've not got enough money as it is. They're deeply impoverished and they're losing money. They've lost loads of money recently. They're in like really poor, dire straits,
Which we don't want.
Which I don't want. No one wants that.
But there's not a fair split.
And I think they're worried they'd lose more, and maybe they would. So there's a real financial incentive to not realise the true shape and scale of male victims, and that's why we need people like Movember who have those £50 million in the bank, and they could the amount of good they could do.
Come on, John Terry, this. So let's talk about male isolation and loneliness. In 2017, the Joe Cox Commission on Loneliness found men to be more isolated than women. Of 12,000 men, 11% said that they were lonely on a daily basis. 35% said being lonely made them depressed. Loneliness for men peaks at age 35, when career and family responsibilities obviously become more demanding. And a third of men say they don't have one close friend. So that's
horrendous.
Now, I haven't found more updated stats for the male close friend thing, but so of three blokes you walk down the street, one doesn't have a good friend. One doesn't have a friend. That's what you're saying. He's saying, I don't have one friend.
That's awful.
And post-COVID, let's think about the working from home aspects of a lot of people's kind of newfound lives. We make lots of friends in proximal situations, right? In work situations, in male spaces. Which again, what is a male space? We can get into that. But we are an increasingly lonely gender, and it's not that women aren't lonely. The stats just massively skew towards men being lonely for lots of different reasons. Like, have you done much research into, or have you looked into this much?
Yeah, well, yes. There's so many things to say about it, and we can't possibly cover them all. I mean, I have a friend who I can't not mention every single podcast called Dr. Susie Bennett. Yeah, just like literally I have to talk about it every time. Only because I'm not doing it like charitably, only because her work is so relevant. She's looked at loneliness specifically, and she's putting together an agenda of male suicide research. There's so little. One of the things I hate about podcasts is how few answers I often have. I don't know often, and that's not because of me, because no one knows. No one's doing the research. There are so many unanswered questions. So she's putting together an agenda on male suicide research about what are the big questions we need to ask and answer in male suicide. If it's the biggest risk to life for all men, and we're going to take men's health seriously, that has to be the biggest priority. So she got together more than 100 lived experience experts and a couple of dozen clinical experts all over the world, and basically asked them, like, what about this? What about that? What about this? And then she put together an agenda. Number one on that agenda was male loneliness, and it was endorsed as essential or very important by 98% of people. So more or less everyone who knows what they're talking about says loneliness is
a contributing factor.
Is a massive part of the problem. So yeah, it's of the iceberg that is male suicide, loneliness is right at the top, and there's loads of reasons for it. A lot of it is because I think, and this is something I speak about anecdotally, we're looking at my dad, who I thought was very lonely when he was alive. He spent his whole life working as a career animal, like highly successful psychologist, travelled the world, had whole books written after him, founded a whole field of psychology.
What's his name?
Jim. And he spent his whole life doing that. I don't remember when I was growing up, I didn't see him as much as my mum, of course. My mum was with me and my sister raising us. And as a result of taking time away from work to raise her children, my mum built huge relationships with local mothers in the neighbourhood, waiting outside the school, doing, different groups, picking us up from school, and, just seeing the other mums.
I mean, I found a stat, motherhood great. So I've got 4 children. One's almost 19, 14, almost 8, and 1. So I've seen the gamut of this, right? So I've seen how my new partner has made lots of friends. Motherhood creates friendships. Almost 3/4 of mums
Yes.
agree.
Yeah.
Now,
Completely.
less than half of men say that becoming a dad resulted in them finding a friend. So 3/4 of women say, yep, being a mum brought friends to me.
Well, I've never heard that stat, but I find it very vindicating to my wife. That's really important, I think. Great stat. And it meant that when my dad retired, he left a lot of his identity behind because it was tied up in his career. And, a lot of his friends were connected to his work and they drifted away, and his purpose and his meaning and his whole identity in life sort of fizzled out. Whereas when my mum retired, she retired into like a whole network, a pre-existing network of mothers who were also retiring. And now, she was doing like Keep Fit, she was doing knitting group and quilting classes, and she like sees them all over the neighborhood. My dad didn't have that.
Why is it that men are kind of not prioritizing friendships, perhaps over romantic relationships? Or, at the same time as romantic relationships? What's happening socially that means that we, social engagements often being organised by our partners. I've heard of partners culling, almost deliberately trying to cull their partner's friends that they don't like out of their lives. So
I think it's slowly. I think that's just slowly changing. I think men are doing more, not just that sort of work, but just more domestic work and childcare work than ever. Like the lines are all going in the right direction over time. It just takes a long time for that sort of shift. It's like a whole societal tectonic that has to come across to give men access to that sort of that work and encouragement into it. I mean, men are still working longer hours than women, so that is obviously quite literally
going to impact our
way.
potential.
Yeah, and I just think women are just naturally more organised people in that sense. Like I've just been on a family holiday. My sister and my mum, to my great shame, organised almost all of it, and my aunt. And I think that's a little bit of both. That I think women are often just better at that, but at the same time, men could be better and should try more.
Because we see each other on social media and you think that you're part of that person's life, that milestone. It's almost like you forget how long it might have been since you saw or engaged with that person, because it still feels like you're part of their life. And so, I liked it. I'd say I said something. It's just like, so it's, all of the supposed trappings of an engaged relationship, but without any of the, the what we get from actually being together.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why men don't do more work in relationships to manage that calendar or the contact book, but I do think the way men interact and talk and share with each other is different to the way women do it. And obviously, we talk a lot about men's groups and how they're so important. There's nowhere near enough of them, and they've been hugely beneficial to men's health, like men's spaces and.
Do you mean like rugby clubs?
Rugby clubs, sports clubs, walking
clubs, yeah.
societies, allotments, men's sheds are kind of great. Men's sheds are very much about older men, and the loneliness epidemic is disproportionately impacting lonely men to a huge degree. I mean, if you look at the disparity in suicide rates in those over 85, men over 85 are like 15 times more likely to die by suicide, so 1,500% higher than women of the same age. And I think that's mainly because those 85-year-old men have probably got no friends, and they've probably lost their wife at that age. And that, for them, that was it. That was the only one that was keeping them going. Whereas even at the age of 85, I think a lot of women still have quite a good social network.
Maybe it's because, I mean, there's no one because. I see friendships as relationships too. And I think women invariably do. They're like, well, yeah, no, so it's a relationship. It's one that, you've got to work on. Whereas, it's not easy to maintain a friendship if you don't put any effort in. But I've got a big thing with my friends that I was watching my partner, going out of her way to buy lovely things for her friends for their birthdays, and they doing the same back, and seeing the joy that it brought to them, right?
Yeah.
And I literally sat down with a few of my friends, and I was like, boys, why don't we do this? It's
Yeah.
like, it's awesome. It's
Yeah.
You've been thought about. You get cool shit, and you get to experience that thing together.
Yeah.
So I said, I don't care what you do for me, but I'm doing this for you. So now, they're like, oh, don't remember my birthday. I'm like, I'm going to remember your birthday,
Yeah.
And then just doing a little something, even if it's
Yeah.
just something small. And it's not to say that I've got this nailed. I don't. But there's one area of my life where I think of things like, legs of a chair. It's like, if you've got your health, looking after yourself, eating well, training, you're working hard in some way, shape or form, friends, family, love, community, all those things, and giving back in some way. If one of those is failing, the chair falls over. Very often we're just not doing the friends, family, love, community thing very well.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'm guilty of similar things to you, and the times in which I have put in the effort to organise things for my friends, I've always been so happy that I have.
It's the best, right?
Honestly, it's amazing, and it's not just for me, but
I heard you talking about a house party. Now, this house party where, did you expand on that?
Oh, it was just a house party where it was like uni. So God, we're looking back 15 years now, and we turned up, me and my guy friends, and there was literally no women there.
And at that age,
it was
what
just
the
like,
hell?
wow. And then I guess immediately you're like, this is going to be shit. And it was actually turned out to be the best house party I've ever been to. It was just like all pretenses and attempts to impress women were not part of the problem. So we could just be ourselves, be our authentic selves. And there was like wrestling matches and pylons and arm wrestling league. And there's a giant inflatable banana that everyone was trying to kick off the ceiling, and I actually managed to get. And it was just like a very tribal, kind of spiritual, like a coming of age for me and all the men in that space. And I think
you're the king for the day for having kicked it.
Yeah, honestly, I got lifted up and carried out the room. Like, I'm not even joking. It was incredible. And I guess that segues back into what I was talking about men's spaces being so important. Not because there's something wrong with women, but I just think there's something that women can't quite understand about men in the same way that I can't understand what it's like to be a woman. I don't really understand. I mean, my job in those spaces is to sit and listen to women. I can't understand what they go through or their lives or lived experiences, but I can understand men a bit more. And a bit like those parties, I want to have them everywhere. I want to have those male-only parties all over the country for all types of men. And a bit like the men's sheds, I think, which are really, really great. Where it's there.
I don't know loads about that. I've heard it. I've heard it talked about.
It's a charity, and basically the sheds for men, as described, and it's just older men at that age bracket of like 85, but younger, where they go and they'll meet other men that age, and they'll fix and build and mend toys often for local community and local families, and they'll just keep busy building stuff. And they'll it's just a win-win.
Doing things around each other.
They get a sense of purpose and camaraderie and friendship, and they're talking and they're building stuff, and they feel meaningful again. Local families get things fixed.
What kind of age men are going to these things? And if
wanted
somebody
to
go to it, how would
probably like 50 and up, I'd say. But I'm sure you're welcome at any age. But it's typically like the men like my dad, who are just naturally, who was really great at building, mending things. And I wish he had gone. That's one of my big regrets. I wished I'd encouraged him to go to one of those groups, because I feel like men need to feel like they have purpose and they matter.
And again, as you rightly touched on, retirement can bring about its own massive loss of purpose and identity.
Yeah, totally. And he I guess he didn't get transition into what my mum transitioned to, where she retired, left her work behind, but then entered into a new phase of life that was all about her girlfriends and having like dinner parties and stuff like that.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. She's great. And I designed her latest invite, and it was like no husbands. A lot of husbands try to come along, and she's like, no husbands.
Did you watch that TikTok? Did you watch that TikTok series where it's like all the girls going out for dinner, and then one of them said, can Brad come?
Yeah,
and then they're like, it was just one girl doing the whole thing, wearing different clothes. And honestly, I was hooked. I think it was like 5 or 6 parts.
Yeah.
And it was all about like, look, we don't want to exclude him, but we also need our own space.
Yeah.
And actually,
Totally.
that's an interesting look at. If it was the other way around, and my girlfriend's actually struggling with her mental health, and come on, let's let her come in. I think maybe it wouldn't have blown up quite so much, because people would have been like, obviously let her come.
Yeah.
It turned out that Brad was cheating scum. So let's not feel sorry for Brad.
You, Brad.
I might have got his name wrong, but
it's definitely a double standard where people are a lot more accepting of women's spaces, like girls' nights out and stuff like that, and then men's. And I know there was a famous study that kicked off online not long ago, Robin Dunbar study, and we can question how valid it is, but it basically found like men need 2 guy nights a week for their health.
Oh yeah.
And
it's
I
been quite
didn't
controversial.
mean go out and get pissed up. I mean, it could be playing.
Why
computer
is it
games.
that's always always the default is, oh, bloke's going to go get smashed. And it's like, it doesn't need to be that.
Sometimes it is, but it doesn't always have to be. It could just
Yeah.
be going on a walk or having a coffee or playing games or board game night or whatever else. The point is that men need more time with other men for their own benefit. And people question the study now, that's fine. But what I find more interesting, again, is that two-tier problem with the comments. And it was just a waterfall of hate towards men. Like, well, women need 5 nights a week. Oh, poor boo-hoo men. Oh, these men are all single, shitty relationships. Oh, why is it? And it's just like, God. And it's that thing where you have the problem of male loneliness, and then the solution to that problem, the antidote.
And these are the same people saying be kind, potentially. The same people talking about, the whole, the social media, be kind.
Yeah.
After,
oh my God, yeah.
The same people, and the same people that are quick to talk about men just, they need to talk.
Yeah.
It's like, cool. Okay. Do they?
Because you have 2 voices. You have one voice saying men need to talk, and then you have another voice saying men need to shut up. And I'm like, okay. Right. Well, or you have men need to open up, and then women aren't free therapists. It's like, okay, well then, which one is it? Yeah. It's like we're getting mixed messages here, guys. And the amount of times I try to set up men's spaces, and like every time it either fails or it's extremely difficult, and you'll face some sort of pushback. And people seem to think that just the very concept of men's spaces is like some sort of patriarchy HQ they're trying to build, when in reality, just like,
because there will be people that say there have forever been men's spaces. We've been forever kept out of men's spaces, in a professional, context, in a Masonic lodge type concept. There have always been these storied, these groups where we're excluded, but we're seeing more and more. I mean, I heard you talk about Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and the differences. And I mean, do you want to expand on that just for a second?
Well, yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that makes me smile, because that was one of my very early formative memories of the Tin Men. That was one of the things that got me into it, where one of these people I mentioned earlier, the feminists, they turned me into this, who I am. She was obviously a Boy Scout. And then I was like, that's so great. Like, I think women should learn to tie knots and raft.
Do they not do that sort of thing in Girl Scouts?
Well, traditionally, no. But I grew up doing that. Like, I can make you a raft out of barrels and wood and rope, and I can take you down the lake. And I was like, my sister did it as well. And like, you should be able to learn how to kayak, and you should be able to learn how to whittle, and you should be able to light a fire, like male or female, girl or boy. That's such a great skill set. And I admire her for joining in many ways. But when I asked if boys could join the Girl Scouts, you get the finger in the face. But also, as much as I think Girl Scouts should be able to learn those things, I don't know if that means they should be able to join Boy Scouts, because I still think there's something valuable about boys having a space for other boys where they can learn what boyhood is like in adolescence.
Isn't typically sport, because I said earlier on about rugby, and rugby's obviously got its own codes and weird conduct and all of these different things, but not every boy's sporty, right? And to be popular. Like, who are the most popular people at school? The sporty ones. Why? Because you're surrounded by a dozen, 20 of your mates quite easily, quite quickly.
It has to be certain sports. I mean, I was in a badminton team, so that wasn't particularly. Oh, I didn't get many girls. Put it that way. But yeah, and also not just sport. I think sport teaches you a lot about camaraderie, and also that blends into roughhousing quite nicely, which is typically something fathers do with sons and boys do together, and it's often seen as like boys will be boys and therefore bad. But roughhousing, which is like where boys wrestle and men and fathers wrestle with their sons, that's really important, because that teaches a lot about consent, and it teaches about physical touch, because too often boys learn there's only 2 types of physical touch, and that's like sex and fighting. But there's a whole load more to
we see it touch. In all species. We see it in all nature.
Yeah. So roughhousing, I think, teaches boys that, and that, just like a lot of spaces for men, is vilified and seen as something bad. And I don't think that's
one of the most beautiful, I guess, things I saw or I've watched, particularly about men's relationships, men's hobbies, and potentially often the quirkiness of them, is detectorists.
Oh my God!
Have you watched it?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
it's so beautiful, because it's like these are we're not detectors, we're detectorists for a start. But it's just, this is a quirky friendship that, on paper doesn't work, but they're bound by this unique hobby, and it could have been anything. It could have been a show about whittling, about woodworking, right? But I just love how it's like, it's almost set up to be a joke, You know, look at these sad men with their things, you know, going around the field, and it's treated like a joke. But I think it's a beautiful look at male friendship.
Yes, I love that show. It reminds me of the meme of where men would rather insert activity than go to therapy. Men would rather go detect metal than go to therapy. Men would rather enact the Roman battles and go to therapy. Men would rather build steam engines than go to therapy. Men would rather, you know, etc., etc. And I'm like, well, maybe those things are therapy. Maybe taking a metal detector and going to a field with your mates and trying to find some coins which we're never going to find, that is therapy. Maybe the tinkering in the workshop is therapy.
The whole thing about, you know, I mean, I'm fortunate to have never done the dating app thing, but it's a joke. It's like a standing meme, a standing joke. You know, if you've got a fish in your profile picture, I'm not swiping on you, right?
Yeah.
You know, men. But how many people go fishing for them? You know, I know a few of my friends that go fishing, love it. They're like, Rich, this is meditation, mate. This is beautiful. You should try it. And I'm like, it's not for me, mate. Yet. maybe one day it will be. You know, maybe it's golf, whatever it is. You know, that form of, you know, why is it that running marathons is more accepted and more, you know, more socially kind of, you know, encouraged, applauded than somebody who's going sitting on a riverbank with a fishing stick?
I have no idea. I mean, I was more
stick. That shows how little a fishing rod.
a fishing. Well, that shows how much you've been fishing.
Once in my life.
I've spoken to those men with a fish in their dating bios, and they're like, "That's not. I didn't take that photo for women. I took it for me.
Oh, super
this was
proud
something.
of it.
This fish represented an achievement to me, at least, and also it represented like a really great day with my mates. But it's frustrating how, a bit like men's spaces, men doing these weird little Roman battles where they go out into a field and all get dressed up and pretend to be reenacting these amazing wars. They're mocked too, when often they're so beneficial to men's mental health. And that brings me back to what we talked about earlier about social prescription as opposed to sort of pharmaceutical prescription. So if you go to a doctor and say you're depressed, often they might give you a prescription for an SSRI or an antidepressant. But now they're giving out social prescriptions. So they'll prescribe you to go and enact Roman battles, or build a trebuchet, or go on metal detecting, or go fishing, or join a rugby club, or whatever else. They'll send you to a men's sheds. They'll send you to a hiking society or an allotment.
I mean, that's a very good thing.
And I was like, I love that. I love that because it takes weight off the NHS. It actually has a massive benefit to men, and it benefits society as well.
And that's happening at scale?
Happening at scale, more and more and more. Like there's so many by and for men charities. I talked about them earlier about these small men's organisations being set up by men for men, and there are loads of them.
So is this something that if somebody said, I went to the doctor for whatever reason, you know, I'm not feeling my best, they'd be potentially prescribed something like this?
A metal detector.
Yeah,
A fishing stick.
Yeah, a fishing stick. I mean, that's heartening. That's really nice to hear.
I love that. But also there's a hidden message there that is kind of depressing, is that the fact men have had to go and do that highlights how many of them have been failed by the NHS and healthcare in general, where they've not had their needs met, so they've gone out and got it themselves, which is great.
That is great. And I mean, just
as
somebody that's seen this process from very, very closely recently with my youngest brother, the support, you know, just to touch on the suicide support, you know, everybody seems to talk a good game. I don't think anybody in the family would mind me saying this. I called a mental health hospital for the want of a better word and said, I'm incredibly worried. I don't know what to do. Where do we go from here? And they said, is he in the act of doing it? I said, no, he's not. I was like, but I know. And they're like, right, well, you need to go down the emergency. I forget the emergency name, you know, the name of the route. And they're like, and then, you know, he'll be assessed and then he'll be prioritized or won't be. It's like, cool. Yeah. A few weeks later, where are we? Yeah. And that is a perfect indictment of the stretched resources, clearly, because they're having to prioritize. And I'm telling you what's about to happen. I'm telling you. And I'm not just saying it lightly, and I'm begging for your help effectively. And, you know, there was so much, you know, support, you know, and so we went, you know, to some private support and all these things. But A, you shouldn't have to do that, and B, you shouldn't be at the point of suicide before somebody says, do you know what? Yeah, all right, we'll send somebody around to come and help. The crisis team, that's it. They said, well, you know, get in touch with the crisis team and they'll support. It's like the crisis team, what they do is they come around and they give it's an assessment as to how likely they think it is, and I might be mangling this, and anybody that works with something like that would be very upset. But I feel like maybe the result of their lack of support is something I can be a tiny bit upset about, and it's just like, because he didn't then, he was part of rugby groups, he was part of, so he had people around him, but it wasn't quite, quite enough. But let's talk about boys, men, education, and where we sit in terms of 2025. How are boys getting on?
Yeah, bad. I mean, for my entire life, boys have been behind at school, and I'm 36.
What does behind mean?
Like worse grades, poorer outcomes, fewer and fewer and fewer going to university. They're behind at every level.
Is it a bad thing to not go to university, considering some of the outcomes of going to university now are degrees that don't guarantee you?
I think I went to university, and I don't think it benefited me as a degree. I don't even tell people I have a degree anymore. But university is more, education in general is more than just having knowledge. There's so many good things that correlate with being well educated that are far beyond and more important than being intelligent. Like you have better health, you're less likely to smoke, to drink, to eat badly, less likely to be in an abusive relationship. You've got higher social mobility. So many, you live longer life, you live a happier life in general. Like there's so many things that are good that come with being educated, that by so many men dropping out of education, of which I think about 500,000 men have gone missing from education in 10 years. That's 500,000 men that are not being given access to what I consider in many ways many of the things that make life worth living. So it's not about, I don't really care what grades you get. My grades are dreadful, but my education has led me to so many good things in life. Most of all, choice. Like a man could choose to pursue education or not pursue education, but often boys aren't given that choice. And although I talk a lot about higher education and how men are behind, like in every level, like every race, every stage, every age, every Western country, with one or two small exceptions. But it starts at the beginning. Like the higher education is just a culmination of boys being behind at every stage. So they're behind. I think they're twice likely to be behind by the time they start school. And then they fall further and further and further and further behind, right through Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, GCSE, A-level, degree, postgrad, and then beyond. So
if we look at statistics, girls are ahead by grade at every stage.
Yeah. I think of it's 36 GCSEs, and girls are ahead in 34 of them. I think there's slightly fewer. I think it's slightly better in A-level, but more or less the same. And yeah, it's just ubiquitous, not just in the UK, but in all Western countries. And now even globally, there are now more boys out of school worldwide than girls, which is very antithetical to what people think. Of course, there's lots to be done for women education in parts of Africa and places like Afghanistan, but in the UK, in America, they're doing extremely well. I mapped out some graphs on my page just a few days ago where it showed women of every single ethnic background being so far ahead of men of the same ethnic background, and have been since the 90s or before that. And no one does anything about it. No one even says anything about it. People don't even know that. There's been a poll in the UK, YouGov poll, and I think 90% or more people didn't even know men were behind in higher education, let alone as far behind as I've just told you. But a lot of it comes down to that very start, and just lower literacy levels, lower ability to read and write in boys generally. And that,
where does this start? Is it parents doing less with them? Is it children? 'Cause I mean,
it's a good question.
So we're talking about 3-4-year-olds entering the school system already at a disadvantage.
Yeah. And if you can't read as well as the girls, you're starting with one arm behind your back straight away. But I would say, I think loads of parts of the education system are failing both boys and girls, but they seem to be failing boys even more. I think education is largely built around the needs of girls. I think a lot of education is just long periods of quiet reading, sat quietly reading, and boys, a lot of ages just do not want to do that. I mean, a lot of girls don't want to do that, but boys deal with it even less well. And long periods of quiet reading, very little physical exercise now. 85% of teachers are female. not much male
And
representation.
that's in primary school. In secondary school, it's 60 something.
Oh yeah, I mean, but that's same as like the lower you go, the fewer men. So in kindergarten, it's like 3%.
Oh god, yeah.
Like preschool, it's like virtually 0%.
So I wonder if there is, and I've spoken to a male primary school teacher friend about this. I wonder if it's the lack of male role models and the fact that very often he said that men are used as the stick to kind of threaten kids with for behaviourally. It's like deeper voice. Right, I'll go and get Mr. X. So I wonder, is it just that we're not seeing? I mean, certainly same for me. If I think about my primary school, I think I had one male teacher the whole time, two maybe.
I had one,
and that's not the school my daughter's in. My youngest, she's not youngest anymore. My 7, almost 8-year-old. There isn't one single male teacher. They bring in somebody to do PE.
And a quarter of schools in England have no male teachers.
Well,
no male teachers.
So
in the entire
all of
school.
those boys in that school, it's not bad that they have female teachers, but they only have female teachers. And with fatherlessness, I mean, do you know the top line stat of fatherlessness, or in the UK?
Well, I mean, there's a causation side, but yeah, basically speaking, boys or any child from fatherless homes more likely to be part of that group that no one likes. Higher suicides, higher addiction, higher teenage pregnancy, higher incarceration, higher violent crime, higher poor health, higher chance of being like smoking. And
so these people don't have a male role model potentially at home. They don't have one at school.
Yeah. Think about that.
So they don't have one in their lives potentially.
Think about if you just draw a big square, and that square represents all the boys in America. I mean, I'm just going to go with America because the data's easier. 1/4 of that square have no father at home. So one in 4 boys have no father at home. And then of that, 80% of them have no male teacher at school either. So talking about 20% of all boys in America have no father at home, no male teacher at school, no primary male role model whatsoever in their lives. That is a problem. That's happening. That's millions and millions and millions and millions of boys. And that's an issue. And it's not like the female teachers doing it on purpose, but it's a bit like the men's spaces, that house party. There was something that men can only understand about other men in the same way that women can only understand about women. And there's definitely research that finds that male teachers are less likely to problematize boys' bad behaviour. Like I was quite naughty at school, not in like a violent way, but I was just kind of cheeky and just disinterested and bored. But I got along with the male teachers because I think they understood that I wasn't actually a bad boy. I was just bored. I was just acting out. I was disinterested and disengaged. And they found ways to get more out of me. So I think having more male teachers, you'll find that they are less likely to problematize a boy's bad behaviour and less likely to see him as bad and more likely to see him as bored.
I said before we started recording that my son, his year 6 teacher, we fell out big time because she's like, all the boys, and your son being one of them, here are the behavioural issues, and it was consistent with boys. It wasn't ill behaviour, from mine or probably, hopefully a lot of other people's perspectives. But she was very, very. I spoke to parents of both boys and girls, and she was incredibly praising of those very compliant, very here, miss, here's another drawing of you, girls, and it was almost like because she wasn't getting that from the boys. I've heard the word used. Boys are effectively schooled like defective girls. Like there's something wrong with you if you're not giving me a note and putting an apple on my desk and you're not listening. Then you're a problem.
That's what you're talking about. Non-cognitive abilities. People say that basically means bad behaviour. And the interesting thing is that if you put a boy and a girl into an exam, they come out with the same results. So although boys are behind, if you look at exams like raw intelligence, they're the same. But if you look at teacher assessments, which take into account non-cognitive abilities, they take into account attendance, poor behaviour, not turning in your homework in time, not listening in class. That's what boys do bad in teacher assessments. So again, it's their so-called bad behaviour, which I would say is just them not being interested, that is scoring them down.
And then what that feeds up into the lower GCSEs, the lower A-levels.
Everything. And 5 years ago during COVID, we all know that all exams were cancelled. So there was no objective measurement of intelligence. Everything was based on teacher assessment. And girls' grades rocketed. And boys went up as well, but girls went up so much higher, which suggests that if you take away that exam and go purely into teacher assessments, there's even greater bias towards girls. And then they bring exams back, and then the girls' grades come down again. So that's obviously a nationwide study of teacher grading bias. And that's one of many bits of evidence that have shown that we do seem to grade girls higher than boys of the same cognitive ability, because boys are let down because of their so-called bad behaviour. But again, I want to reassert, I don't think it's bad behaviour. I think it's just they're in a system where they just can't learn as effectively as girls. And they are treated like defective girls in many ways, and less likely to if we have more male teachers. So I'd like to see more male teachers for sure.
If this was a potential problem on the other side, where, and again, I don't want to whataboutism.
We'd have no
here.
problem with that. If girls were going to schools, every teacher's a man, we would have no problem. Be like, yeah, we need to have some.
Right.
That would be such
it would be a scheme.
Controversial thing.
There'd be a scheme, right? It would be advertised on TV, a governmental scheme. Hey, let's get more people into, or more women into teaching.
And especially if that was compounded by a lot of mothers not being at home. If it was just the opposite, because it's not just the lack of male teachers, the lack of fathers, and the lack of role models in general, but we would have no problem addressing that if it was the other way around. And I'd be just as passionate about it. But we seem to have an issue with it with boys. And I remember we just want to blame boys and make Netflix series about them and stuff like that and just point the finger. But I know there was a study where they literally asked boys, like, what is it you don't like about school? Like, they asked them. And they boys never seem to be asked on this sort of thing, but this one did ask them. And the three things they gave back were, what do you like most about school? And they said, nothing, which was the first answer. Great, good start. Second was substitute teachers. So that's the PE teacher you mentioned, they bring in the man. Substitute teachers. And the third was PE. Yeah. So that says it all. And that shows you where the failure really is, because I don't think it is boys failing school. I think it's schools failing boys.
I agree. Let's talk about Fringe, so-called Fringe, online communities.
Oh, yeah.
And the impact they're having on boys and men. And whether or not, let's clarify what that is for a start, and then whether or not we're potentially missing out on being compassionate towards these groups. So you're easy to say incel type communities, right? But I don't think somebody has to go full incel to be potentially considered part of a fringe or a group of boys that are maybe or men that are opting out of relationships with women, are being taken down a garden path of potential hatred towards, which we obviously don't want. But should we be able to find some compassion towards these boys and men?
Yeah. As I said, pop the talking point now, where I guess the next step on from not having any positive male role models at home, not having any positive male role models at school, the boys are going to look elsewhere. Often they'll go onto social media and they'll find people like the Andrew Tates, although I think he's overblown now.
Are you bored of saying his name?
He's just goddamn. Everyone's always like, well,
I was not going to mention him, I promise.
When have you ever heard or seen him ever? Like, it's over. But boys are going to look for that leadership elsewhere. People like Andrew Tate are smart enough to know there's a power vacuum that he can step into, and that's what he's done. He's just basically hoarded all these boys and taken them to his arm and basically grifted and exploited them. But the real thing is not why do people like Andrew Tate exist. The real question is, why do so many young men and boys follow him? And I think it's because there's just been a huge power vacuum of positive male role models, and he's just taken advantage of that. So it's like this, the axiom of politics where if there are serious issues in society and the responsible parties don't talk about them, the irresponsible ones will. And that's what's happening. That
was going to be a later question, actually. Not just left, right, but who politically is getting this right? Are there any? Is anybody getting men's mental health right?
No. It's like racking my brains. Like, yeah, I'll throw in Mark Brooks. He's the guy that he whenever an MP gives a great speech about boys and men, which is rare, he's always the one that's written it. I'm afraid. Do not give the credit to like the Nick Fletchers or whoever. It's him. He's writing it and he'll give it to them. But
I think I heard you say that the left effeminizes or emasculates and the right doubles down on masculinity.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a catchphrase. But I think the left are, in the area of men and boys issues, especially in issues like domestic violence, they've brought hook, line and sinker into the idea of it being a women's issue, of violence against women, and they want to protect women, understandable, and men fall through the gaps. The right, again, quite general perspective, but they write quite interesting family values, and the idea of a vulnerable man is not part of that ideology either. And the vulnerable men fall through the gaps. So the vulnerable man, abused man or otherwise, falls through the gaps of both sides, where neither side wants to help, because one wants to do women and girls, and the other wants to do family values. And neither of those really see vulnerable men, in my view, and that means that no politician is doing much about it. Because talking about men and boys is not a vote winner. It doesn't get you very far. There's a reason why I don't use my full name and don't like giving up my home address. It's because people don't like these things. They're not popular in the same way that women's issues are. There's a reason why you get sneered at and called an incel and misogynist and whatever else, and why people like Aaron, Murray Strauss and others get threats and picketed and harassed, because it's not popular. So politicians know that. If they were to start banging the drum for boys and men, they would lose votes and they would lose their seat, and that would be their job gone. So I understand why. So
how do we turn it into a vote winner?
Just by telling them, like making it very clear. Like, I don't think it's.
So you think they've got it wrong that it's not a vote winner? You think that if they talked about this and they talked about it in the right way, that potentially it could be, or do you?
Well, I went and sport my ballot last year, went down, scribbled it, and didn't vote for anyone. But I could definitely vote for the Labour Party again if they were to pass the Violence Against Men and Boys bill, which they are not doing. They're the stick in the mud, and ironically, it's the Tories that are pushing that. But there are definitely votes to be won, a bit like Andrew Tate scooping up the disaffected boys and men. There's a space for a politician to come in and be like, I'm going to do it. And I think that person would get a lot of support. It just requires bravery, which is sorely missed in politics, let's be honest.
So do you think by default then your Farage your Farage, let's be specific, picks up that vote because he speaks for... Does he speak for strong men and like
maybe
is he to many a potential mayor role model?
Not to me. Let's put it that. I mean, I think he obviously Reform are winning a lot of votes, especially from men. But I'm talking about a contingent of left-wing men who would never vote for Farage, myself included, that can be won over, because I think the issues I talk about are inherently left-wing issues. If being left-wing is about social equality, then men are part of that. Equality goes both ways. So I'm thinking there's a lot of men that care about equality that are not being properly served or spoken to, that are disaffected, an army of them, myself included, that can be won over by the left if they had a bit more guts.
I mean, I think a potential vote winner is, let's talk about alienation and post-breakup kind of rights of men. Politicians that understood the issues that happen to men post-breakup and in relation to shared parenthood and shared. Because if somebody understood that and actually looked out for men, because you've talked before about the rights of men in relation to their children post-breakup. We know that that's a contributing factor towards suicide. Mm-hmm. We know it's a huge one. We know men just want to be heard. We know more than that, they want to see their children. Mm. They want to, and they don't want to have to go through this lengthy court issue where there are biases against them. So I see that, just speaking politically, as a potentially huge vote winner. Yeah. If somebody could say, let's look at this fairly in a balanced way, because we know that having a father not necessarily in the home, but around for their child, whether it's shared equally or just partially, we know that's beneficial to that child, much more beneficial than fatherlessness. So I think I look at that could be a vote winner, or does that then turn women away?
I think talking about men's health and male suicide is a vote winner. There's like a sliding scale of issues that the general public are becoming increasingly comfortable talking about, and we're right at the bottom of that scale, and that is men can talk. Men's mental health is pretty safe to talk about now. And now we're moving up that scale, talking a bit more about male suicide. We're talking a little bit about boys' education, and that's like the jalapeno level of spiciness. Whereas I'm right at the habanero, the Scotch bonnet, the ghost peppers, which is male victims of domestic violence and male victims of sexual violence, particularly by women. That is the ultimate. That is the ultimate spice. We're not going to get there anytime soon, but we can concentrate on the men's health, male suicide, because people do care about those things. It's sadly something that we all have personal experience of. But the problem is with male suicide in particular, we've become stuck at a very sloganeering perspective of it, where men can talk, men can cry, men can talk, men can cry, men can talk, and they've been doing that.
Real men cry.
Yeah, it's like,
You know,
okay.
boys get sad too.
It's like that's just a slogan. It's like, well, what are the things they're talking about? And like, if you actually sit in those spaces with those men who are talking, the suicidal men, a lot of them are telling you about experiences that no amount of talk or crying will actually ameliorate or solve, such as what you talked about, child custody battles, family breakdown. I think 1 in 5 male suicides is linked to child custody battle and family breakdown, where like a lot of fathers in family court trying to win back a child, and they're fighting a losing battle. They're not losing just the child, but the home, the relationship, money. They're being poorly treated in their opinion, and they're literally losing the thing that matters most to them in life, which is their child. And of course, suicide is a massive issue for them. Like the correlation between family dissolution, breakdown, and suicide is just, you cannot ignore it. So, tired of talking about men can talk, and I would love to talk a little bit more about the things they're already telling us, such as, but not just limited to, family breakdown, child custody battles, experiences of abuse if we're feeling brave, joblessness and debt, physical health issues, like the things that men are going through that they need additional help solving, that is more than just talking about it. Like, talking is certainly good, helps you deal with the problem, doesn't necessarily solve it. So I wish we'd just move up that scale a little bit more, a little bit spicy, a little bit braver. And I think a politician who does that, who pulls us up, they will be justly rewarded with a lot of support from a lot of men, but not just men, through their vote. And anyone that is thinking about doing it, as someone that's been doing it for 5 years now, I've had my head above that parapet, saying all sorts of stuff that is very unpopular. And it's overblown, the amount of people that would going to give you bomb threats. And I didn't get much abuse ever. I get if I were to go through my DMs right now, you'd have to scroll a long way down to find anything mean or horrible. I mean, it's just support. Thank you. I wish more people were doing this. You're whatever, an X, Y, and a Z, and like very few, if any.
That's really good to hear.
Really good, yeah.
Incredibly good to hear.
Everyone's always like, you must get so much abuse, and I'm like, I'd love to get the violin out, but please, no.
No, that's wonderful, because it means that it's working.
Yeah, but I think it's a lot of it's this fear of saying these things is overblown.
Let's talk spicy. 99% of men are rapists, right? Women can't rape.
Okay.
You said spiciness. Women can't rape in the UK.
I mean, the ultimate spicy issue is false allegations. I think we're not ready for that. But stepping down a bit, sexual violence.
I love that you've got this kind of hierarchy of issues in your head.
Out. I've got mapped, and I've got a little thing that's like, we are here, and we've got a long way to go to get to that level. But
so in the UK, women cannot legally, by definition, rape.
Okay, in the UK, rape is defined as the forced penetration of a penis. So if you don't have a penis, you can't perpetrate rape. That leads us to stats that say 99% of rapists are men, which is not surprising, considering that's how it's defined. Obviously, that 1%, there are 1% of women, 1% of rapists are women. Those are women that indulge in joint venture when a woman helps a man rape someone. So those women can perpetrate it, but only as an accomplice. But directly, they can't do it.
So when somebody says, actually, 99% of rapists are men.
Yeah, it's like saying 99% of people get kicked in the balls are men. It's like, we know that. That's if you actually read the law of rape, it would be quite obvious why that is. In America, it's slowly changed. They have, state by state, it's very different, but it's still penetration, but it doesn't have to be a penis. And they also capture data around men that are forced to penetrate. So those are the men that are raped by women. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot more than just 1%, I'll put it that way. But in the UK, people always ask me, well, how many men are raped by women? And I don't know. No one really knows, because no one's capturing the data. They're just not included in the studies. If you look at the Office for National Statistics, who are the government's sort of data collection arm, it will say 98% of rapists are men. You scroll down to the definition of rape, and it'll be exactly as I described it. So we don't know. It's just a blank space.
So there's no data for sexual assault, no data for rape.
Oh, sexual assault is slightly different, but specifically rape, yeah, there's no data. I mean, there's a couple of independent researchers. Siobhan Weir's great doing it, but really very little, and certainly not enough. And like I said, in these podcasts, there's always the answer I most often give is, I don't know. No one knows. Big question mark. And the biggest question mark of all is reserved for male victims of sexual violence, especially by women, because they're raised in the law, they're raised in academia, and we just don't know.
What could fix that? Redefinition.
Changing the law. Yeah, changing the law. I mean, there's been dozens and dozens of petitions I've pushed for to get the government to change the gender definition of rape, and every single one's failed. The government have said we have no plans to change the definition of rape, and I don't understand how
They have no plans to.
no
Why?
plans.
Just a lack of interest in.
Just as not, it will be very unpopular, won't it? People will be like, you're minimising women's issues, but it's not about it. You're unminimising men. Like, you're bringing them back into the picture. Like, they've been literally erased completely. Like, imagine if there was a crime that was defined in a way that only men could experience it, and that was written in black and white in the law. Especially what crime as serious and devastating as sexual violence. That's what's happening to men. And it's worse when you think about, we live in a world where, quite rightly, we're going looking at everything in a gender neutral way. We refer to policemen as police officers. We refer to firefighters or chairs. Like, I respect that.
Yeah.
Like, we should recognise the 10% of police officers that are women. We should recognise firefighters that are women. But so we should also recognise men who are raped by women too. But we don't do that. We gender it. And like I said, it's across all forms of violence, like domestic violence, like I said, there is no strategy for male victims of abuse. So we consider it the same. We consider men who are abused to be women. We consider them to be victims of violence against women.
Because again, it's not a particularly large hop, skip, and jump to the impact of that on that man, or on those men, and the potential ramifications of the impact on their mental health as a direct result of that act. Right? So,
I mean, very invalidating, I think, is to put it politely, extremely invalidating. And like I said, you asked me, why don't more men come forward? I'm like, well, I think not referring to them as women would be a great first step. A really great first step.
not enough women come forward as it is. Not enough female accusations are lead to conviction, and we know this.
Yeah, but men, like, I mean, domestic violence, we know that men are 2.5 times less likely than that to report abuse. Like, the data around domestic violence is often around criminal convictions, because that's something we can get our hands on. We can see that, 90% of convictions are against men. But there's so many levels above that erase men from the picture. Like, men are less likely to recognise abuse against them. They're less likely to report it to the police. If they report it to police, the police are less likely to register it as abuse. And even if they do, if it goes to court, and by the way, in terms of the police officer's least likely to recognise a male abuse victim is another male police officer. So it's not women, it's men that are not seeing it. And then even if it is, you go around to prosecutions, they're less likely to be prosecuted and less likely to get a conviction. And then you arrive at the 1 in 10 are men. So it's like, well, you've been filtering men out at every single level.
One question I've always thought in relation to this is, if two people are equally drunk, where does consent lie here? And does it skew towards?
I don't know. I mean, what is that? That is like, I mean,
it's just
that is a banana skin of a question.
it's almost not even a question. It's
I know women and men on both sides of that.
George, I don't know many people I could even talk about that particular sentence, those particular order of words too.
That campaign, I was like, John and Claire were both drunk and they had sex, and John raped her. And I was like, well, if they were both drunk and they both had sex, like, how do you square that? Did they rape each other? Like, what?
Yeah.
I would not know how to disentangle that. I would say every single case of sexual violence needs to be properly interrogated on an individual basis with full context, rather than just A or B. Like, I've sat as a juror in a rape case, and it's very complicated, and I really actually quite enjoyed seeing it broken down in that level of detail. So I don't know if both parties are drunk. I would love to know, if that was a real case, if I sat down and spoke to both of them and looked at the evidence, maybe I could draw a line, but the grey area is obviously enormous.
On this note, 60% of crimes are committed by 1% of people.
63, yeah.
63. I think that statistic, and this, I know we're talking mostly about men's health, men's mental health, and physical health here, but that as a statistic blew my mind when I heard you say that out loud. 60% committed by 1% of people. Sorry, which just threw me. I don't know why it threw me quite so much.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's I get into an argument. I mean, I'm pretty much in that argument perpetually online. Someone's like, well, 1 in 3 women are raped. That must mean 1 in 3 men are rapists. And it's like, no, because it's not a 1-for-1. It's a small percentage of men who are perpetrating it at enormous levels, which doesn't change the impact.
On that, the demonisation and the 1 in 3 men must be rapists thing, I'm currently trying to sort out a birthday party for my 7-year-old, who's turning 8, as I said. Now, she's at a new school. She started in January. And they've got the most efficient drop-off and pickup system you've ever seen in your life. So you drive in, they get taken out of the car by you've each got drop-off times and pickup times, taken out of the car by the teacher. They run on in, you pick them up at the end of the day, which really limits the amount of time for parents that don't walk to the school. Really limits the amount of time you potentially got to meet other parents.
Okay.
Now, as I said, I'm brand new to the school. She's brand new. I said, who would you like to come over for your party? We'll get a bouncy castle, we'll do all of this. She gave me names. I know one mum. And I said, do you know any of these parents? Oh yeah, here you go. So-and-so's number. Brilliant. So I managed to I built the numbers that way. I messaged and I had one come back and said, well, I don't know you. So can we meet tomorrow? I said, do you know what? That's fair. Yeah, fine. Let's, I can't meet. I'm dropping her off then, I've got to go, but maybe we can have a phone call. And she wouldn't give me an answer until we had a phone call. It was effectively to vet me. And she said that. She said as much. And then I went to a party that my daughter was at this weekend just gone. And another mum, whose child I've invited, was there. And she came over and she was like, you are Amelie's dad? Yeah. She went, yeah, I just wanted to come over because, again, I don't know you. And then her husband came over and she said, we all just both thought it was funny that you're the one organising it. Wow. And I said, I'm not a single dad, and I've got a partner, and as I say, I've got 3 children. My marriage, and now I'm now divorced. One child outside of that. So I said, right, okay, so it's funny. They were laughing. It's funny that you're the person organising this. Well, I would be because she's my child.
Yeah,
right. One, and the insinuation, and she said, oh yeah, I was speaking to so and so's mum yesterday, and she was adamant. I'm going to phone him. I need to phone him. I don't even know who this man is. Now, again, I'm very concerned about the whataboutery here, but I am almost convinced that were that on the other foot and I was a woman and I'm a mum messaging, they don't have the same concerns.
No.
Now, despite
most of child abuse being perpetrated by women. Like the biggest child abuser are women, mothers. That no one ever thinks about that. It's always because of the added violence of sexual? Well, when you're talking about sexual violence, then it's no longer mothers, but all of the child abuse, then it's mothers. A lot of that's because women spend more time with children. Right. Like if you're the primary carer, I think we should be mindful of whoever's spending time with children. Really,
she said at the end of the conversation, "Oh God, I haven't offended you." That was such an afterthought. It was like, do you not?
That must mean she knows she's offended you.
Yeah, of course. So both of these mums thought got between, and there were lots of other children that didn't. And I'm like, right, thanks, because what you've just done is I'm a predator. I'm a predator until I tell you that I'm not. And how can I prove to you on a 20-minute phone call, 10-minute phone call, that I'm not a predator, that I shouldn't be somebody you should be wary of for your child?
Yeah, I mean, that's a message I get often for a lot of dads in like playgrounds. They'll be like taking a photo of their own child, and then you get some mum normally coming over asking questions. As I'm taking,
who are you here to see?
Yeah, it's my child. I remember reading a news report of a man who was pepper sprayed by a woman for taking a photo of his own child. I remember seeing, you were talking about the drop off in the cars. I remember reading a police report of a man who waved at a child from a car, and they had opened an investigation. They tracked him down, found him, and then they put up a response, and they're like, "Don't worry, he was just waving the child across the road." And I see that again and again and again, like not just fathers, but men that are older brothers of their kids. I mean, I walk the park every day, and I remember not long ago, a kid fell off its bike right in front of me. My girlfriend goes running over, and I stay way back. And she's like, "Why didn't you come and help?" And I was like, "Because people think I'm a paedophile, especially if I'm my own." And it's not. That's not.
It's a sad line that we need to. I appreciate it. I half understand.
It's not just father. It's a balancing act, because I do get it. It's right.
It's like that thing of if you're walking behind a woman, cross the road, mate. Yeah, just do the right thing.
But I've had it where I've had women. I've literally caught a shadow and I've spat and shouted and I screamed. I've screamed. Ah! And it's been like a tiny little woman. And I'm like, oh, geez. I'm like, can you just? Like we're in Lewisham. It's late. I'm scared. I would say yes. It's not just fathers. It's a lot of men feel this way. They feel vilified. People feel afraid of them. A lot of that is understandable. I think it's perfectly fine for anyone to be mindful of their safety or a child's
And they
safety.
should, again, they should be. I
That's
just thought,
fair. But then if you're acting in a way that's disproportionate and hysterical to the point where you're like terrified for your life, you can't even leave the house, I would say there's a bigger problem. And if you're engaging in what is creating a cultural fear around just men in general, that is over the line. There's a difference between just common sense, mindfulness, crossing the road.
that's maybe where we're at.
Yeah, we're way beyond. Sometimes we go way beyond that. Like we're talking about, would you rather meet a bear or a man in the forest? I'm like, you serious? And people are literally saying bear. And I'm always like, it's crazy. It's like, but that's such a dishonest way of asking the question. Am I right? You're in a coffee shop with all of them, everyone's men. I'm going to swap out every single man for a bear. Are you going to do that? No. That isn't. People that answered bear, they are on the wrong side of that line. They're not making like common sense, mindful decisions for their safety. They're stirring the pot of cultural fear on men that impacts black men doubly so. And I remember I saw the hypocrisy firsthand. Like, think about when George Floyd was killed in 2020. Everyone's talking about the danger men face, or black people face, but it was black men overwhelmingly that killed by police in America. Like 99 out of every black Americans killed is a man, because people are afraid of black men. And then the next year, Sarah Everard was murdered, tragic in London. Everyone was doing the whole fear mongering around men, and I was like, now you're feeding into the same cultural fear on men that is going to harm black men most of all, and you're literally feeding into the very problem that last year you were campaigning against. Like this fear mongering on men, being violent. Ask yourself who's going to pay the biggest price for that, and it is going to be black men. And like they've had fear mongering from day dot. Like 20 years ago, it was the super predator. The black men in America, these young juvenile men that they're not even human, they're super predators. And now we're talking about toxic masculinity. It's just the same, but it's not just black men; it's all men. So ask yourself, what are the consequences of this disproportionate fear mongering where a father can't even organise a birthday party?
I'm just trying. And I got home that night and I was like, I'm just trying to do something nice.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, I feel for you. I mean, I've had that, but not to the same extent.
On your point there, and it's only tangentially related, but it still relates, is that I always find the people that are most likely to say, oh, yeah, no, I'm with Martin Luther King Jr. when he says, content of character, not colour of skin, they are always the most likely to disproportionately attack white people for things that they do or say.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like, no, I thought this was content of character. No.
They're the people that lean into the men are X, Y, and Z, and then if you have a problem with it, they'll go straight to, well, if that doesn't apply to you, then ignore it, and if you're offended, then you're part of the problem. And I was like, if I were ever to make a generalization against women, and then a woman would be rightfully offended, like she isn't the problem, I'm the problem. If I were to say women can't drive, which is a pretty benign generalization, but an offensive one, and then a woman was like, well, I find that offensive.
You should have seen me reverse
She's not
parking.
the problem.
Just did.
I just think people just can't seem to accept any accountability or any feedback on their language or worldview at all. They seem to think like they're just the hero of their own story every single day. And yeah, you're right. It's often liberal people that are the first to, if you ever talk about any group of people in a generalizing way, they'll be the first to condemn you. But then they'll also be the ones that are making those same generalizations against men. And then they'll say, well, 90% of murderers are men.
So are you hopeful for men's mental health? And conversations like the ones that you start, are you hopeful that in the next few years things, what's better? What does good look like here? What does better look like?
Good is when I get to wake up and the biggest risk in my life is not me killing myself. That would be a great start. Quite a way off that. I mean, in fact, we just had the worst data this century, male suicide in the UK. So that's 25 years, the worst rates of male suicide. So it's not getting better. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. However, I can see around a corner a little bit more than other people. I know what's coming down the road, and what's coming down the road is good. Like, I'm increasingly hopeful about what I've seen. We've got we've got the men's health strategy. We've got the violence against men and boys bill, which will probably fail, but at least it's been discussed. We've got people talking about the Minister for Men, like things that I was talking about 5 years ago that people would laugh at me for and like bully me for. And now it's been discussed in Westminster. It's been passed. It's been written into law.
The strategy itself, have there any details been released, really?
No. They were not at that point. They've just done a big public consultation period. So they asked a lot of people to give us your thoughts. So you could, it's closed now, too late. But you could have gone in, given your feedback, which is great, first step, perfect. And now they've taken all that information, they're going to go through it, and now they're inviting organisations to partner with. And I'm gonna offer. I want to work with them in the comms area. So everything I've seen so far has been very popular. The question is, are they going to make violence a men's health issue, like domestic violence? And I obviously think they should, because violence against women is a women's health issue. No one's denying that. So should violence against men. So that I want to see that written into the men's health strategy. Too early to tell if it will be, but my overall point is that it's getting better. There's certainly a lot of reasons to be depressed in this area, but it's not as bad as it was a few years ago, and it's getting better. More and more people are changing their mind, and I'm glad it's actually been discussed. And I've just seen it in the comments, because obviously I'm right in the middle of it. I get sent a lot of stuff, and I'm seeing less and less hostility, more and more acceptance, more and more mainstreaming of these conversations. We talked about Chris Williamson offline, and obviously he doesn't talk in the same way that I do, but he's shown that there's a massive growing appetite for discussion around men in a way that is masculine, doesn't see them as like like broken women, and he's shown there's a space for them. So him and others, and to a lesser extent myself, I think we're showing that.
I don't know, you're providing people like Chris and myself to a much lesser scale with the basis on from which to have this conversation, and like it sounds corny almost to thank you for doing so, because welcome. It's hugely appreciated. I think
the funny thing is, he will say stuff to me that I told to him, and then people, you not get annoyed that it's borrowed. It's like, no, because I stole it from someone else.
There's rising tide, all boats, all of that sort of thing, right? I think we can all help each other, and more men talking to each other can only be a good thing.
Yeah,
but
it's happening. It's just happening in just general conversation now, and it doesn't take long. Like if you look at the diffusion of innovation, which maps out how does an idea become viral, and it'll be anything from like the iPhone to the civil rights movement. When does that spark happen, and then something becomes mass market? Because it was like, iPhone was like, well, it didn't exist. Now everyone's got it. Martin Luther King, no one talking. Now everyone's talking about it, and the magic number is 12.5%, I think.
Really?
So once you get 12.5% of market adoption, once 12.5% of people have bought the iPhone, suddenly it booms, and that's when you enter that crazy fit. So, are we at 12.5% of people that are sitting in the seat right now? No, but we're getting there. And once we're there, it's going to be like an explosion. It's not going to be like the snail's pace, which it currently does feel like forever. And I think we're a lot closer than we might think.
I really hope more women listen to this as well.
Well, loads of women. I've got a quarter of my followers are women.
Is it quarter?
Like tens of thousands. So I'm grateful for some of my most loyal and fiercest followers, especially mothers, boy mums. They're some of the best followers, my oldest followers. So everyone's like, it's like, oh, you're just a bunch of angry men. And I'm like, there's plenty of pissed off women here too, guys. Come and meet them.
We're all pretty upset about these things.
Yeah, loads of women.
We want to fix it.
Yeah. I really appreciate the women. I always talk about how their biggest role models in my life have been women. And not just those close to me, but just generally in society. They're the ones that have got change. Like, for whatever you want to say about feminism, good or bad, you can't deny they've had a huge, massive success.
That's wonderful.
Like the organisation, the campaigning, the protests, like, wow. And that's mostly because of women. It's a bit like they organise the calendars, but they organise the protests. And we just need them because they're just so diligent, hardworking, and organised. And they inspire me to be more like them. And I wish more men would learn those lessons. So more women, the better.
Right. I think that's a lovely place to end it. Thank you very, very much.
Likewise.
Well, no, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Cheers, man.
Thank you.
And we are back. I hope you enjoyed that episode, took something from it. An important conversation for me. And yeah, I really respect George and what he's doing, and the uncomfortable conversations he's having, and the work he's trying to do. So thank you, George. Thank you to you as a listener, as the viewer. I really appreciate you. I haven't said this the whole series, I don't think. If you like it, please give us a review. 5 stars only, please. Let's not be a hater. Let's be kind. Let's be good to each other. Yeah, subscribe. Like and subscribe. Right, I'm going to shut up now because I did a long intro. Have a good one. We are back on Monday with a fantastic episode. Louise Butcher, the topless runner. Do you know what? I'm not going to tell you any more than that. If you don't know who she is, the topless runner. And I interviewed her, and she was topless the whole time. So that's coming up this coming Monday. Thank you for everything as ever. I will see you on the other side. Goodbye. Forever. See you later. Bye.